folks. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws podcast with East Forest. I guess it's called 10 Laws with East Forest, but that's the official name, I believe. Either way, I'm supposed to be asking people about their 10 laws in their life, and I forgot about that. I don't think I've done that in months, but I realized that this podcast has been going on for over a year, which it doesn't seem that long, but it's a great milestone. We hit over 50 episodes, and it's just an idea I had because I love digging into other people's stories, sort of how they make things work in their own lives, and it's such an amazing opportunity to talk with other people, get to know people, and just learn the skill of listening. And I've been loving it. So thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reaching out and telling me what you think, especially the people who are positive. I don't care about the haters, but really about all those wonderful reviews you give, because that helps me stay motivated and it helps other people think about diving into this experience. So I've been doing a lot of podcast recording this week because I'm going to be in tour all of June from Seattle all the way down to San Diego and back up to my place through Vegas. So I'm kind of doing this massive loop. And I wasn't sure if I'd have a lot of time to actually be recording on the road. I will if I can, but I wanted to get some in the can. So I'm very much in like that podcast spirit where I've been having some cool conversations with quite a diverse range of people that I know you're really going to enjoy. I just can't wait to share them with you. I just got back from the Awaken Futures conference or summit, whatever, gathering of people in San Francisco. It was a conference that combined meditation, psychedelics, and technology, or at least that was the subject matter we were exploring, sort of the combination, the trifecta of those things. And those are all things that I'm quite interested in how they merge, because that's kind of, in a way, a merging that is happening in our society right now, as we see, obviously, the use of lots of technology, and a lot of that being disruptive and a lot of that being quite helpful. And I talk a lot about my own struggles with that, and even music as technology and ceremony as technology, and just kind of looking at these things. So exploring that intersection with meditation and psychedelics was interesting. And most importantly, I just met a lot of really cool people and had a lot of great conversations, and hopefully will lead to some more interesting opportunities to connect with you out there in the real world. But I did 2 East Forest ceremonies, one each morning there, and just a credit to the organizers from Consciousness Hacking who put together this conference. It was great to be able to do something experiential in the morning and ceremonial, to kind of acknowledge those things that are larger than our mind, and speaking and listening through our hearts through an experience like a group ceremony. And we did some... Giovanna Garcia did cacao during this ceremony. So it's kind of a cacao ceremony that we drank cacao first, and then I launched into the East Forest ceremony. And then we also had Dustin DePerna doing some meditation and Marissa Rada-Wepner doing meditation another day. But I'm kind of curious what you think, if I should be bringing in more cacao into my live events. And some of them it might work, and I thought it was quite fun to bring something a bit psychoactive and heart-opening into the experience and have that offering for you. And so we might explore that on a few dates on this touring in June. So in June, there's a lot of dates. If you go to eastforest.org/tour, you can see where I'm going to be. But Seattle, I believe, is sold out, but there might be a couple more tickets they're adding. But Portland, Oregon, we have tickets left because I'm going to be at the Old Church on June 1st. That's a big venue. But then I'm going down to Springfield and several dates in San Francisco around the Bay, the Dharma Collective and Meta Village. That's on June 7th and 8th. And there might be one in Marin on the 11th. So definitely, folks in the Bay Area and San Francisco, please check that out. Tell your friends, get advance tickets. That really helps us do our planning and feel the excitement of coming down there. Be bouncing over to Sacramento on June 9th, and then the Mammoth Yoga Festival, and we'll be, of course, at Esalen for the East Forest Retreat, also with Marissa Rada-Wepner. That might be sold out, or there might be like 1 or 2 tickets left. We're trying to lobby them to offer us some more tickets, but not sure. If that doesn't work out, though, and you want to come to a retreat, join us in Utah for the fall retreat here in Boulder, Utah, southern Utah, which is just incredible. I mean, go over to the retreat tab of the website and see more about what we're doing here for that. It's mostly about the landscape. And I had several people come up to me at the Awaken Futures conference saying they're thinking about coming out to Utah, and they had questions because I know it's sort of an unknown what it is and where it is and how it is. So check it out. There's a lot of information at eastforest.org with videos and pictures and testimonials and descriptions about the fall retreat. And it does typically sell out. It's not sold out yet, but it does typically as we get closer. So I encourage you, if you're curious or feeling the call for that one, to check it out and maybe pull the trigger. Then we're moving down and we'll, on tour, be going through Santa Barbara and Laguna and possibly San Diego, looking into that, and up through Vegas. And that's all kind of at the end of June. So I really, really look forward to seeing you on the road it's going to be a 5-week driving thing for me. So ask me later how that's going. We'll see. See how I feel about that. The other thing I wanted to thank you for is Music for Mushrooms. It just came out, and a little over a week ago, as I'm recording this, and you guys helped make it number 1 on the iTunes New Age charts, which I can't say New Age charts was ever something I was trying to chart on, but it's the most appropriate category, I suppose, when you have to categorize these sorts of things, like a 5-hour mushroom album, which is absolutely the kryptonite of our modern society, certainly the music business. I mean, just for an album where a track is 30 minutes to chart at all with streaming and downloads, and most people stream, right? I remember telling someone, I said, well, it's impossible for it to chart because I'm not expecting it to, and I don't care initially, because listening to one song, one spin of one song would take 30 minutes. So when it started to move up those charts, it was, to be honest, strange. And then when we kind of asked you, hey, let's put some energy behind this as a community, because what a wonderful story to be able to talk about and see and witness as a sign of the times that this esoteric album with mushrooms and psychedelic in the title goes to number 1. So I was floored, and I just can't thank you enough if you did buy the album, or certainly you're sharing the album and this continued energy that's being put out there, because it is definitely crafting a new story. And it was showing me about the hunger out there for tools and resources and community and information and the freedom that wants to happen around this subject. Because mushrooms are, the psilocybin is one aspect and of a larger picture of just the soul and the heart and the human experience of just wanting to feel alive and free and understanding and on our path. That is one avenue, the psilocybin, down that road. It's one very powerful, amazing tool, but it's one of infinite tools. And so I don't want you to think, as I talk about this record, particularly this month, because it's current, I don't want you to think that it's the only tool. But, as Ram Dass said when I was at the Ram Dass retreat a few weeks ago, someone asked him, it was something like, sort of like how he got on his path or what he credits the most, his biggest teacher. And he said the mushroom, which was surprising. I mean, maybe not to me, but it was beautiful. It's beautiful that even at 88 years old, he's still crediting psilocybin as starting him on his spiritual path. And look at what benefit that gave the world, because that led him to going to India, to meeting the Maharaji, and to coming back and to writing all of his wonderful books and giving all of his talks, and me creating the record and all the other things that have been done with Ram Dass that he's given and devoted his entire life to service, that started with the catalyst of his first psilocybin experience that brought him, as he describes in the song Home, currently on chapter 2, that it was just that. Is the first time he felt like he was home, and that place of home was a place of love. So it has been a really cool trip. Thank you for continuing to share that record and telling me your stories about how it's working, of course, off-label too, just in the background of your lives with yoga, people. Actually, this quick, cool story. Radha's son, he's 7, and he was in art class at school last week. And the teacher put on East Forest music. Now, I don't know what East Forest music, but I have a feeling it might have been the Mushroom record, to do artwork in art class. And he raises his hand and is like, oh, that's my mom's boyfriend. And of course, his teacher was probably surprised and tickled. But I'm surprised and tickled that there's art teachers using the music for kids to make artwork. I love it. Kids get this stuff. That's what I hear a lot of stories about parents using the music for their kids to go to sleep at night, or it's sort of a nice solace to kind of brings kids in the center because they're in that open fairy tale space already. They don't question it. It's sort of like speaking their language. And I think that's a really wonderful indication of sort of the energy that's speaking to us. Like it's our own childlike voice. It's our own childhood speaking to us. And we're just there to listen to that wisdom that's always there and that perhaps we often discount or say that, well, that's not my adult voice. That's just like something too simplistic. There's something quite pure and beautiful in that, and that voice is speaking to all of us. So, yeah. If you go over to eastforest.org and click on the music tab and you go over and see the Mushroom album and you click on it, you'll see that there is one piece of merchandise. And it's the only piece because the Mushroom album doesn't fit on vinyl or CD or anything like that because it's too long. So I made a ceremony box. And it's basically a kit that has all the primary tools, of course, not including the mushrooms, that you would need for ceremony. So crystals and an eye shade and a journal and some scents and, of course, the music and a protocol about ceremony and what to do and how all this stuff works together. And it's a wonderful way for you to support the work that this album is getting into. And it's the only physical thing you could do. So there's only 100 of them. I signed them all, numbered them. And if you're interested in picking one up, they're now shipping. And you can get that only at eastforest.org right now. I'll try to bring some on tour in June until I run out of them, as much as I can bring. But as I said, there's only 100. And also, I don't know if you heard the Duncan Trussell podcast I did. That was super fun. I met him in Maui, and I'm a big fan of Duncan, and he's just the sweetest guy. And I just really he's funny, and I like what he gets into, and I like the way he does it. And I really enjoyed that conversation. So that's over on the Duncan Trussell Family Hour podcast. But today, I'm bringing you a podcast with someone that goes by Yung Pueblo. And you might know him primarily from Instagram or from his book, Inward. He might have another book, I believe, coming out or other stuff. But Inward's the one that was given to me. And he's got quite a robust following on Instagram where he puts up bits of his poetry and his writings and words. I met him through Elena Brower. He lives in New York City. He's a deep meditator. And I think you can catch that vibe in our conversation and in his work. And it's something that I think you will enjoy. So enough from me. Let's get into this. This is my conversation with Yung Pueblo. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to speaking, and I'm really glad that Elena connected us.
Yeah. You guys have known each other for a bit, or how do you know each other?
I've known Elena for a while. I think probably since 2017. I don't know how she came across my writings, but I knew that she started sharing them. She's been sharing them for a while with her audience. And I think eventually I just reached out to her and I was like, do you want to meet up? Because I saw that she was also in New York City. and we just hung out one day and really hit it off. And we have, I'm really just so grateful to her, because I feel like, especially in the beginning, she really sort of helped launch my career by supporting me in my book launch back when I self-published Inward.
Oh, nice.
That was in November 2017, I think. Yeah.
And we're talking about Elena Brower.
Yes,
yeah.
Elena Brower, yeah. The one.
We're just going to say the Elena, yeah.
Yeah, the Elena, the one who runs New York City.
How long have you been in the city?
I've been in New York City since 2014, so it's almost going on 6 years, and I'm really enjoying my time here. It's been, I feel like, pretty necessary for my personal growth and for all the things that I've been doing with Yung Pueblo.
So where were you before that?
Before that, I was in Boston, which is where I actually grew up. So originally, I was born in Ecuador, in a city called Guayaquil, and I lived there with my family until I was about 4 years old. Then we moved to the United States, and I grew up in Boston. And after Boston, I spent 4 years in the middle of Connecticut when I was attending Wesleyan University. Then spent another 2 years back in Boston, and then 2014 happened, and I was in New York City and have been here ever since.
I spent time in Boston too for school, and I also lived in the city for 9 years. And there's not a lot of people I know. I have a lot of friends still in New York who, like, you spoke about it so positively. You're like, it feels like a good place for you, and you like it. That's so fascinating to me, especially, looking at the work that you put out there with Yung Pueblo.
Mm.
New York is such a unique place. I do think that it would benefit most Americans to live there for a year or two, almost like that would be our civil service. It's like you have to live in New York for a year. The only requirement is that you just have to figure it out on your own and make it work. And after that year, you can take off, you can stay, whatever you want to do. But it's such an international place, and a place that really you confront a lot of aspects of yourself.
Right.
That it's just you learn a lot about yourself and others and the world. And but it's also a challenging place. It's very corporatized and crowded. And what do you find so beneficial about it for yourself?
A few things. I think it was interesting because I think I started practicing Vipassana meditation, which has really been my personal catalyst for everything, for my growth. It helped me discover that I was a writer and I could produce poetry and prose, and really just helped me grow immensely. But I think I had started back in 2012. It was the summer of 2012 when I did my first course and a few other courses after that. But it wasn't until I got to New York City where I saw the need to start meditating every day. And it was sort of like trial by fire. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, in a pretty loud area of Brooklyn, and there was I felt like it helped me understand the truth of suffering rather viscerally, either through my own sort of, personal moments I was having and just watching the interactions around me where there's just a lot of struggle, whether it's socioeconomic or, just the pace of life and how everyone's sort of cramped together. People are pretty on edge at some times. And there's also just, and on the positive end, it just feels like you have a little bit of the entire world here. So you really just get exposed to so many different cultures, different types of people, so many different sectors of public life, and private, private businesses. And it's just, everything's here. But I felt like it was sort of like trial by fire. It was like, come to New York City because I know things happen here. And it felt like the right fit for my wife and I. And it just, we knew we needed to start meditating because we wanted to start growing. And it also just helped us sort of balance the chaos of New York City, which, only really sort of reflected my own inner chaos. And that, we just, had to start growing there because a lot of people are like, how do you meditate? How do you do that in New York City? And I'm like, well, I think the conditions here really helped me to see the need for that.
That's so interesting. You're saying that the chaos of the city is your fuel and your catalyst for wanting to meditate. I mean, I can understand that, but I guess the natural question is, if that helped propel you into that space, you don't then feel the desire to leave that and just no longer have to sort of have a counter reaction to that energy that you live in?
No, so I think what I really feel is sort of the chaos in the city really reflects my either strength of equanimity or lack of equanimity. So when my equanimity is low, the city seems really chaotic and a bit much to handle. But when my equanimity is high, it just looks like any other moving part or moving sort of, series of reality that is like rapidly coming together to make a particular moment in time. But it doesn't seem like too much, especially when my mind is calm, when my heart is calm, when I can see things clearly. It's just another moment, as opposed to ascribing it, particular traits. So it's fun to be able to witness how I handle things, especially if you're like, going through Midtown, or you're like going through Union Square, and you're like going through these sort of really crowded areas. And, how I feel is how I sort of paint the city. And being able to learn that and sort of, not really describe it as any one direction or the other, but really just sort of seeing that, yeah, it's how I really feel that, describes how I see the world, whether it's New York City or not.
I remember something really changed in the city when the iPhone started to take hold about 10 years ago. And now when you're on the subway, pretty much everybody's got headphones in, or on the street too. And most people are looking at a device. And it was strange. There's so many people around you, but it can make you feel a bit like a ghost, because there's not much of that witnessing aspect of just sort of like two souls passing one another. Like in a small town, you say hi or look each other in the eye, just sort of like, you're here, I'm here. And that's a powerful thing in itself. And then you have thousands of people passing you every day, and they're afraid to look at each other for, sometimes for very practical reasons, but nonetheless, it can be an interesting experience. And I wanted to ask you about the fact that your work really took off on Instagram and social media, right? And this is like on a phone. And how do you feel about that, or what's that relationship for you? Do you feel that like that's subversive, like working inside the system, or do you have mixed feelings about this, or what's your own relationship to your phone and social media and how it relates to your work?
I think my relationship with my phone is sort of like, like a lot of people's. It's, if I spend too much time on it, I don't feel great. And if I minimize and I'm successful at minimizing my amount of time on my phone, I feel better. And if I'm more so engaging with real life, or, either getting work done or reading, or just, looking outside my window, it always feels a little more productive than just spending tons of time on my phone. But though all my work is on my phone, so I do have to give it a certain degree of time, but I've gotten better and better at controlling it. One of my favorite things to do now is to just like put my phone on airplane mode when I'm really not trying to like receive messages or anything, and just, literally sort of like etch out my alone time when it feels appropriate, which has been like a really nice tool. But I think I took to Instagram for a really simple reason. I just knew that everyone was hanging out there. People were just like coming together on these online spaces. And I also saw the potential for online spaces supporting actual physical communities, which now we're just seeing more and more and more of. But I knew that, we were in a period of time in history where everything was only becoming more and more fast paced, and that our attention spans were just decreasing and sort of, just becoming smaller because we were being inundated by higher degrees of information. So my thought was, when I started seeing on Instagram that there were a lot of, wonderful poets. I remember in particular coming across the work of Rupi Kaur and R.M. Drake, and being really inspired, not just by their messages, but just the way they sort of just took that moment in history and, made it theirs. They sort of, instead of putting pictures up, they would put up images of their poems. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. That was just like, to me, that was pretty revolutionary. So I thought, okay, well, my message is slightly different, but I still have that sort of similar format. Let me try it and see if that works. And once I started doing that, things really just started picking up, because it also felt like it was the same time when I started writing was the same time where like, the global community was having a conversation about self-love, and then the following conversation about letting go. And now I think a lot of people are having that conversation about actually pausing before just falling into an old reaction. And it's exciting sort of being a part of these conversations, and just, everyone sort of thinking together and really trying to figure out, what do these big terms mean? What do they mean for me? How can I apply them in my life? And can they actually help me in my personal transformations? But it just felt sort of natural, to be honest, because I thought at the time, I can go ahead and write a manuscript. But one, I knew that I needed time to be able to develop my voice. But at the very sort of, as opposed to like working with an editor or something, I knew that I could just work with the public and sort of put things out there and see, one, if I felt good about them, and two, if they connected with people. And just doing that sort of back and forth with a growing community was just like an excellent vehicle for me to just figure out, okay, what message is important to me, and what actually, what are people actually thinking about right now too.
Well, that's a very vulnerable way to do it too, as far as a creative process, because it's all just sort of out there. As I hear you saying that you're discovering yourself as you're creating it, and you're doing that in conversation with your audience that you're building. Do you look back on your work and see it differently in the past? Sort of like, oh, that's a younger version of myself, or your ideas have evolved? Because, one thing I like about music, for instance, is that, especially instrumental music, is that it just sort of contains emotion. And, words, in a sense, are more literal. I mean, that's what's wonderful about poetry, is that it's sort of, there's a playfulness to the words, creating kind of a painting and more like an emotional quality or a feeling. But nonetheless, I think words are challenging that way, because they have a literalness to them, in a sense. And do you look back and think like, oh, I see how I was sort of finding my voice, or do you feel that way now? Or it's just sort of like, using language in general. Is that something you find challenging?
Totally. I don't really find it challenging anymore. Because I sort of went into it in the sense of really understanding that what I'm going to put out there is going to change, because I like to write with I know that I don't know everything. I know that I'm in the midst of my personal path to freedom, and, being in the midst of doesn't mean I'm at the end of. So I always sort of write with that understanding that, what I know now will be different from what I know a year from now. And that's totally okay. It doesn't mean that I should stop and, not write anything until I'm perfect, but just be open to growing, changing, and sort of refining what it is that I understand and what it is that I put out there. So yeah, when I go back and I read things from 2015, 2016, I think, I see the idea that I was sort of trying to get at, but didn't quite actually hit at, and sometimes I'd notice where I'd be writing, the same thing. It would kind of come up like every few weeks or so. I'd sort of be trying to hit at the same idea, getting a little closer. And then finally, in 2017, I'm like, oh, like that, that piece is sort of a compilation, and it's actually a full expression of what I was really trying to say that I couldn't quite say before. So it was cool, literally being able to see my own progress in the archives. And I think it's kind of awesome, because it's a different way to be able to view an artist. You're just like literally seeing their progression. I think it's sort of similar for musicians, because, musicians now from the beginning of their career, they'll have a SoundCloud page, a MySpace page, and whether they leave things up or not. But a lot of times if you put anything up, then there will be some sort of record of it in the internet, whether you take it down later or not. But people will have like your old MP3s or whatnot, and you'll see how your music really evolves, and literally your skill at being able to manipulate whatever it is does improve over time if you really put some effort into it.
Wait a minute, people have MySpace pages still?
No, I'm just saying, like, when you go back in the day, like, there's so many
I
artists,
know. I'm just
like.
giving you a hard time. Yeah, like my Friendster profile. I mean, if someone dug that up, boy, that's probably before your time. Well, let me ask you about your creative process. This is something I'm really interested in general with people and artists. I mean, I believe that creativity is sort of a sacred quality of all human beings, and it's something that makes us unique as humans. Is that we can do this thing, we can create sort of something out of nothing, and this sort of muse that comes through us. And I also think it also really helps with our mental health in general to tap into that sense of fulfilling our own gifts and creativity. So it seems like meditation is directly linked to creativity. You mentioned before that in Vipassana is where you discovered that you had a voice, or like you weren't really writing before that.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that, or that discovery process and how it's linked together for you.
Totally. I think what meditation did for me was that it sort of connected different areas of my brain in a way that were pretty like blocked up before that. So I never really thought of myself as a writer, or never saw writing as a possibility until after I did a few courses, and I felt like, oh, I should share, that healing is even possible. Because I think that was the first sort of startling discovery that I came across, was the fact that, you could actually relieve your personal mental tension, that you could actually have a mind that's a little less turbulent, and that there are things that you can do during tough moments that can help stabilize you to just like live a more effective and successful life. And to me, that was like a big shock, because that's not how I was raised. It's sort of, a lot of us are just raised in that Western sense of, if you have something that troubles you, you're basically just going to have to deal with it for the rest of your life or take medicine. But to be able to take some skill, something that you learn, a practice, and use that to your benefit, to me was like a big shocker. But I don't, it's interesting, because the Vipassana practice is personally for my personal liberation, right? I'm trying to move forward in wisdom as much as I can, and release the patterns that are sort of just making my mind cloudy and limiting my perception of reality as it is. But what that process has done for me is it has created so many externalities outside of that process, by like improving my relationships, between me and my wife and my family and my friends, or helping me come to better decisions more quickly, or allowing me to better navigate difficult situations. And one of those many sort of externalities is just being able to write and compose words a little bit better. And I think I've seen a lot of people, I other musicians who've practiced in a similar technique have said the same thing, or engineers, everyone who, whatever it is that you sort of had a knack at, you just get a bit better at. And I think that's just because the mind is a little bit clearer.
I just got back from the Ram Dass retreat, the spring retreat in Maui. And there are a lot of Buddhist meditators there. And we were talking, the theme of the retreat was emptiness.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you meet my friend Alexandra Roxo? She was there too, I'm pretty sure.
I might have. There were almost 400 people. So
it's a lot of people.
Yeah, you don't actually meet everybody, which I thought was a bit odd. Alexandra Roxo, where's she from?
She's based in LA and New York City. She goes back and forth.
Does she have one of those other names? Like,
no, that's just how she wrote. That's just her name.
Okay. I don't think I did, but if I did, I apologize.
No worries at all.
Yeah. But one thing, I had this cool conversation with someone. We kept kind of, this idea comes up of remembering, or how we, that's often a theme about, you're sort of remembering, or you're falling into this space of emptiness. And I was reminding myself that in order to fall in, we have to fall out. We have to forget. And it's sort of the necessary other side so that you can fall in. And we live in this space of dualistic beingness, just having mind and getting to a space of, let's just call it no mind. And that seems to be the engine of beingness in human form. And it's sort of honoring the fact that falling out is as sacred as falling in. And it's the compassion we have going between these states of being, of sort of forgetfulness and remembering, is important.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find that with Vipassana or meditation or even creativity, that sort of the real action is the compassion that you have as you move through these states? Or do you find it to be something different for you?
That's interesting. Well, one thing that what you just said is bringing up is learning how to better engage with creative moments when I'm flowing between, literally having a creative moment and then something arriving that I think is worth, jotting down, and then
Say more about that. Yeah.
and then forgetting, right?
Yeah.
And then you like, you sometimes you might get like a stream of information that's so quick, and then you're already sort of building a cascade of ideas, and then you lose some of the first ones. And it's funny when I go back to, so I'm like, when I start literally trying to write them down, I've noticed that whenever I'm like aggressively trying to remember an idea, it just creates all sorts of blockages. But the moment that I can like compassionately, gently sort of accept the fact that, whether this idea returns or it never returns, I'm going to be totally okay. And that immediately just like creates space in the mind so that the idea quickly bounces back, or even just sort of shifting my attention to the next thing very thoughtfully. And it'll, it just does something special to the mind where that lack of tension just allows everything to flow a lot better. But that's something that I've been sort of working with and honing, because sometimes I like to carry an idea in my mind for a while without jotting it down and just sort of allowing it to really mature. And then I'll take the time to write it, but I'll like literally, think back to something that I had been thinking about, and it won't be as crystal clear. But the moment I really allow compassion to, take a step forward, sometimes it comes back, but it doesn't always come back, and that's fine too.
Well, tell me more about your
pretty
actual
helpful.
creative process, because I know I've heard you speak a bit about this. It seems kind of labored, or it takes a lot of time for something that feels simple. And or do you have it like a practice in the sense of like you do it every day or a particular time of the day or only for this amount of time? I mean, what have you discovered works for you?
It's a process that it's honestly always changing. I think in the very beginning, I did a lot of just allowing things to come as they are. And, things will kind of like ideas will spontaneously come, and I'll jot them down and see if I need to change the words at all. And that still happens today. But now I try to more thoughtfully sort of examine, what's in my mind. What have I been learning lately about myself, or what are things that have been coming up repeatedly between my wife and I? My wife is also a really serious meditator. And, we'll notice that the lessons that we're both sort of getting will have some parallels that we can sort of extend into like that whole, universal human conditioning, the things that we all sort of experience. But I think a lot of it is just, it happens in the morning. After I wake up, I take time to just listen to myself and see what's going on in the mind, or if things just come, they come rather like throughout the day. So when it's very thoughtful writing, it'll happen in the morning. And when it's sort of non-thoughtful writing, they could just literally come at whatever moment and throughout the day. And then I'm just like ready with my phone, and I'll just kind of jot it down and see if it's complete or it's not complete. And then, give it more time to marinate. But it really varies. And then sometimes it's on, like, sometimes I'll have those like, 11 a.m. sessions before I like go to sleep at night, and the mind will get quite clear, and I'll like start putting things together. But it's a real, I almost feel like a catcher in a baseball team. I'm really just sort of like kind of open to things just coming, and I've gotten okay with that, because it sort of doesn't make a very precise writing structure. It's not just like morning pages, or it's not just like, this is the time to write. It's really like any time is time to write. And then there are also days or even weeks where I have nothing new to say, and that's totally fine. Being okay with that has also been a real sort of challenge, where like I'll go a few days without writing, and then I'll feel that sense of frustration, and I'm like I haven't written anything new or anything that I feel like is worthwhile. And then I come up with the thought, okay, well, what if I never have anything good to say again? And then it's like, can you be okay with that? And that's also like a really sort of challenging and I think positive lesson that I'm learning for sure.
Is it okay to put you on a spot to read something, either something
yeah, if you'd like to, go ahead.
Something from Inward. That's your book I have here in front of me.
Do you want to read something, or do you want me to?
I'd like you to. Yeah, I'd love to hear it in your voice, and I'd like you to choose it.
Sure. Let me pick something out that's new.
Are you working on? When did this book come out, by the way? Inward.
So Inward has 2 dates. It's came out as a self-published version. It came out in November 9th of 2017. And then it remained as a self-published edition for like 10 months. And then it was re-released through a publisher, Andrews McMeel, on September of 2018. And now it's available in bookstores everywhere. And initially it was only available online through Amazon and through Book Depository. But now it's actually available everywhere, which that was also quite a journey too.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like getting book deals is like getting a record deal. Sometimes it's not the best deal, but at least they get the books out there and they get distribution handled.
Yeah. And I think those things are changing too. I think people are actually getting better deals now that they have been able to build, like when you like self-publish a book and you show that, you have your own audience, the book
Right.
can sell, then that gives you like a bit more of leverage to be able to, get a little more of what you deserve.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have a little piece I can read. This Wonderful. One's more prose. So it goes, time does not heal all wounds. It just gives them space to sink into the subconscious, where they will still impact your emotions and behavior. What heals is going inward, loving yourself, accepting yourself, listening to your needs, addressing your attachments and emotional history, learning how to let go, and following your intuition. With time passing, it sometimes feels like it has helped us heal, but all it has really done is give us space to learn how to live with the wound. Just because we stop thinking about it doesn't mean it is fully healed. The passing of time allows what was conscious to sink deeper into the mind, where it becomes a quiet yet powerful lever that forces us to behave a certain way. Under our thoughts remains the impact of a harmful yesterday. Healing is possible. It just requires us to move inward with patience, honesty, and courage. If we do not address our accumulated patterns in our subconscious, they will simply remain there, always affecting how we think, speak, and act. Our accumulated wounds and the conditioning will push us into blind reactions that make us repeat the past, restricting our flexibility of choice. Healing is a combination of the process of letting go and building new habits. New habits require determination, and letting go is best done through an effective practice. That's it.
Thank you. An effective practice.
Yeah.
Does that mean, tell me can that be different things, you think, for different people?
Oh, totally. That's something that I like to, so I tend to write for an audience of non-meditators. It's hard for me to actually know where my audience is personally at, but I like to write for people who, haven't started meditating, don't really have a therapist, don't really have any sort of introspective practice. And what I hope I'm doing is sort of giving people like a new intellectual format for them to be able to see themselves in, and just like help them to begin to understand that, and then also encourage people to find a tool, whatever that tool may be for them, whether it's some sort of, different form of meditation practice that really fits them, or a healing energy modality, or a therapy practice, breath work. You can just go on and on. There are just so many different effective practices that are available today, and I really encourage people to find something that meets them where they're at. So often I say, you want to find something that is challenging but not overwhelming. You want to find that special sweet spot for you where it's, hard enough that it does make you stronger, but not so hard that it just sort of brings up way too many things too fast and you can't really engage with them, and it really just makes you want to stop the work. So finding that special thing, it does require courage because you have to go out there, try new things, and find something that, is really giving you results. But I think that really looks different for different people because even though our minds may be quite similar in how they're structured, our mental contents, our personal emotional histories are drastically different. We all have very different stories that we've lived.
And it's also challenging for people to find teachers or methodologies that work for them because there's so many choices out there, and frankly, they're not all good. There's plenty of stuff out there that's really not backed by much, or there are plenty of charlatans out there as well. Having that sense of, I suppose that's someone's journey to figure it out and find their path. Would you recommend Vipassana to a lot of people? Or do you think, I know, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like the original meditation techniques of the Buddha. And it's a pretty intense process for 10 days to go through that.
Yeah, I let people know that, I practice Vipassana, and if they feel any sort of inclination, I often let them know that they can go find out more information at dhamma.org. But it's really up to them. I can tell them what I practice, but I also tell people that, what they might need at the moment can be something completely different. So I don't say like, this is the thing that everyone has to do. I'm just like, this is what I do. What do you do? And I try to really come forward not with any sort of condemnation or any type of superiority, because you can get a lot of results in different places. It really matters that that you actually have some sort of practice, and you don't really become fully dependent on someone. And I see the danger of that dependency to a teacher or something like that, but really becoming independent, learning a good practice, having a good guide, but also becoming pretty self-sufficient and becoming a self-healer. Like it's really, ultimately, it's your power that's liberating yourself.
Well, let me ask you about liberation. What does that mean to you?
To me, it's the ending of misery. So it's the complete ending of all craving, the craving that causes misery.
Do you think that's possible to have a destination or an end in the human experience?
Yeah, I think everything that arises passes away. So even though human life may seem, depending on the way you look at it, whether it's one life or whether it's multiple lives, there once was suffering, and then there can also be the end of suffering.
How do you feel about the idea that liberation occurs over and over again? So it's something you fall into and fall out of.
That's interesting. I really do think that liberation, it's like every single moment where, you actually have inner peace, right? So it's like something that's accumulated over time, and it's something that as you're sort of moving forward and learning how to engage with yourself, better understanding yourself, and you can be able to better witness, the reality of who you are and what the nature is, and you being okay with that, and it not causing you tension. I think those are powerful liberational moments.
Yeah. If you had to try to bring your work currently, like sort of the motivation behind it, into a single word, or if it had a single song, would it be something about liberation, or what would it be for you?
Oh, I love that. I think it's sort of dancing between healing and liberation, which I think are two very different things. And I don't know if you said one word, but I would say healing and liberation. But to explain that, I think that people have very different aspirations, right? Like some people just want to feel better in this life and don't have any particular high aspirations, for like total liberation or anything like that. They just want to feel better in the immediate. And I think that's where sort of most people are. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's totally fine. And a lot of these like ancient Eastern tools, they're also made for that. They're also made to support you in just receiving the benefit that you're trying to get from it, and being able to live a little more peacefully, being able to learn the usefulness of kindness, and being able to sort of just like live a less tense life. And I think that's where a lot of the Western world is now, which is a lot of my audience, and just trying to support people with the reality that, you can actually heal yourself. But then there's the other side of things where it's like, which I write a lot less about, but I do like to point out that occasionally that, healing does have a beginning and an end. Even though it seems so far away, there is the potential to be, fully healed, fully liberated. And even though that may be quite scarce in human history and visibly, I think there are people who are, profoundly freer that can really help us, inspire us in our own paths.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there certainly are examples of people who have, like you said, it's pretty rare, that have become free.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I personally find, maybe it's just sort of a predilection I have, almost like there's a danger that I feel inside me intuitively of chasing something all the time. Or it's like I'm always feeling like I'm not at a destination, which maybe is liberation or freedom or however you want to look at it. And a shift happened for me at some point, somewhat in the near past, where it felt like it was more fluid and diffused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like I'm moving here, I'm moving there, and I'm in multiple places at once at times. Like my ego, for instance, I stopped trying to push it away. And I was thinking, well, first off, it does a lot of good things for me. And second off, I'm not going to get rid of it. And so it's like, how do I work with it? And how do I have love for it and compassion for it as I see it doing its thing, but maybe I'm less attached to it, which is different than saying it's not going to get me anywhere.
Right. Finding the usefulness of it, right? Because it's there to help you survive. It's useful.
And it helps me notice things, and it helps me. I mean, there are obviously benefits, but then, Ram Dass had this line when on the record that we're releasing, and he says, your karma is your mind. And there's a lot to unpack in that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
It made me think, which is sort of ironic, but it just made me think about, like, liberation isn't going to come from thinking your way through it. You're not going to think.
No way. Yeah.
But it also is a certain kind of barometer that helps you lead you in certain directions and make decisions. And there's a reason why, we're here, and there's a reason why we have a mind, and there's a reason why we have this incarnation. And it certainly isn't probably just to like push all that stuff away. And so I really start to think about these things. And I don't know, what does that bring up for you when I say that stuff?
I think it's pretty skillful, because I think and I think instead of the idea of like striving and searching, it's better, like I personally better think about it as, what am I putting effort into? Right. And if your mind is always in the future, then you're not successfully being in the present moment. So, right, becoming obsessed with the idea of like, okay, one day I'm going to get over this old trauma of mine and I'm going to be really healed, and I won't, that is you, just focusing on that. That can be something that's inspiring, but that can totally complicate the matter and make it harder for you to be able to deeply appreciate the present moment, where you can find liberation in that moment right now, if you can actually engage with it in a way where compassion is able to flow and you're able to witness things as they are, as best as you can. But
so presence is sort of like, is where the healing is, in a sense, you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Because if we get knotted up in the past, knotted up in the future, and we sort of fall into that constant mode of recreating the past, then that's a lack of, awareness of the present moment. So yeah, like presence.
Would you say then that your work is cultivating presence?
No, my work doesn't doesn't do anything to the human mind. It's what we do with our own minds that helps people. My work is just here to inspire and to inform.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't think, I think like what you said, thinking is not going to liberate you. I think thinking can help sort of like expand our ideas and help us like put effort into things. But at the end of the day, a lot of that healing work and a lot of that liberational work actually is happening in the subconscious. So to get into the subconscious, you really have to use your capacity for feeling. And it's through your ability to feel reality as it is that you're going to really set yourself free. And that's personally what I've seen in my own life. And I think what I believe so far.
Yeah, it's like the mystic poetry or your work. It is cultivating a feeling, though. I mean, it's working through mind, through words, but it is working with the subconscious and your heart by sort of stirring the pot of emotion. And, they take that work and yes, they do. I suppose they feel inspired, but it's like a painting or a dance or a song.
Mm-hmm.
It's all singing about the mystery in a sense. We're singing, we can only sing around it because the mystery is the mystery.
Definitely. And that's what I sort of strive for, is to like elucidate a little bit of what may seem mysterious. And I think our own minds oftentimes seem really mysterious.
Yeah.
And that's why I've been finding myself writing more and more about how, we go through these difficult moments. And then even after we stop thinking about it, like I was just reading in that previous piece, even if we stop thinking about it, it doesn't mean that it's gone or that it's healed. It actually has most likely sunk into the subconscious and is now sort of pushing us to behave in a particular way. So understanding that, being able to have that be a little bit illuminated in your mind, and to me, the hope is that then sort of, propels you for the next moment where difficult things happen, you take a greater and longer pause instead of just jumping into an old reaction. And hopefully, if you're able to give yourself that time, instead of, actually just allowing the past to happen again, you then choose, okay, that's what I've always done before. And now actually let me try a bit of kindness, or let me try to, defend myself in a more effective way, or, find another path of action that is different from before and see if that's a bit more effective for you. And to me, that's the actual experience. And that's where change is happening.
So do you agree that sort of the change you're speaking of is an internal personal change, and that's how we radiate out change in the world or in our communities, is through our internal shifts?
Yeah, partially, but I think the world changes, both ways. I think it changes through interpersonal cooperation, like mass movements, people coming together to believe in an idea and make it tangible and real in the real world. But and I think we've known that, right? Historically, history has changed through social movements, through the application of different laws, through very sort of material things. But then there's the reality of people putting out meta into the world, people actually feeling the different changes that are happening in them and choosing different forms of behavior that are more kind, that are more compassionate, that are gentler ways to live in the world. And also, vibrating out a lot of positivity. I think that's also a big way to shift the world. And I think the two really move hand in hand. That sort of global cooperative movement amongst people, and that like personal internal movement that's happening inside yourself to really heal yourself and understand everything better.
Would you say that trauma is something that your work is addressing? Because you're talking about things that happen that sort of get lodged into our mind at deeper levels, and in how they don't necessarily get healed, but they're sort of pushed down. And that makes me think about trauma.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely one of the big things that I'm addressing, whether directly or indirectly. But what I try to do is sort of take a bigger step back, and instead of just relying on the word trauma, I like to say moments of intense emotion, because I think there's a lot of moments that are like highly traumatic, right? That may need like a very sort of skilled approach. and a very sort of specific set of modalities, like very serious therapy or, even different forms of medicine to help you overcome that and live a good life. And then there's also the long series of intense emotions that we felt, like great forms of sadness and great forms of loss, or, different moments that we wouldn't necessarily categorize as trauma, but are still difficult moments that we feel. And I think it's not just the traumatic moments that I'm addressing, but it's any sort of hard, intense emotion that we felt, because we actually don't realize that the imprinting that's happening in the subconscious is actually, it's happening really often, and it's happened a lot through our lives, literally numerous times, where we felt very strong things that just get accumulated in there and predispose you to feeling that same emotion again in the future.
And your medicine for that is essentially presence and cultivating new patterns of reaction that are new and more compassionate.
Yeah, it's almost like just slowing everything down, and that's one thing that I feel like meditating has given me, is like when difficult things happen, I feel a little more braver to just like slow things down and just see, instead of just like jumping into reaction. I'm sort of, just seeing, okay, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what actually feels right, as opposed to, having an old emotion that immediately jumps up, and it's like, no, that's not quite right. I know that's what I normally would feel in something like this, but who I am today would actually respond differently. But yeah, in a way, slowing things down to be able to perceive things a little more clearly, I think helps a ton.
Well, would you say then that would you say that there's sort of an innate human quality that is more compassionate? Sort of like we're getting in touch with something less real.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, but the difficulty of that is that that's sort of underneath all this such thick layers of conditioning. And I've been realizing, through everything that I've been going through, and just seeing my peers who also meditate really seriously, and people who do, tons of different modalities that help them get to know themselves better and feel a bit freer, is that what we think of as human nature is actually love. It's compassion. It's an ability to, really problem solve at an effective level. It's a high level of creativity. And this sense of human nature is really, at the core of what it is to be human, and what our minds really contain. But that is sort of totally kept underneath all of these heavy layers of conditioning, where we find all of our craving, our aversions, all the fear, all the hatefulness. And that is really our human habit. What we've been habituated, either, historically in our own personal lives, or evolutionarily, through the development of ego and all of that has, because when I think of ego, I was loving what you were saying, because it's not something that we should be punishing ourselves about or trying to like completely eradicate, but it's a tool. It's an information taking tool that helps us survive. It's your ego that, when something traumatic happens, picks you up and helps you keep going. Because human life is full of, very difficult moments. But if we didn't have ego, we wouldn't be able to keep going. And I think that's sort of well, it's not really a nuance, but it's something that's coming up again right now, because people have known this before too, I believe. But understanding that the ego, right, it helps you survive, but it doesn't necessarily help you thrive. And that's where, when you sort of decrease the denser aspects of ego, you can more so live from a place of consciousness, which is what that sort of human nature that I was talking about, that contains that creativity and love, that can really help you thrive and actually be happy. Because the ego can keep you safe, but I don't think it can really make you happy.
Yeah, what's the line? It's a good servant, a terrible master, or something like that.
Oh, that's a great one. I forget. Yeah, I forget who that was.
So you're hopeful. You're hopeful about the human experiment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's been incredible seeing what's been happening. Like it's when I think about it, the world has become completely globalized, right? Now, more so than ever, an increasing number of people are able to travel to different areas of the world, and not just travel, but get information from different areas of the world. And a lot of different groups of people have, either by force or by different conditions have migrated to different areas of the world. So we have a situation where a lot of these very ancient Eastern practices have now moved to the West, and Western therapy models have moved to the East. And literally the best of all these different cultures are widely available. And if you live in a major city, you have access to so many different things, especially especially if you're at the beginner level, right? You don't always need to go to a monastery or to find a shaman or anything like that to begin. And especially when you want to begin, you can literally just go to Google and say, what can help me with anxiety? What can help me, with a personal transformation to help me come out of all of this anger? And there are so many different things that you can try. And I don't think these things were available like that before. I think really at no point in human history there's this level of accessibility. And though obviously accessibility has a long way to go, it has come in a way where it's quite historic. I think people have access to tools now that can fundamentally shift human history. Because like I said before, human beings have always tried to change the world for the better, right? There's always been these sort of moments of rupture, moments where people are coming together to change different systems. But this is also going to be the first time in human history where not only are people continuing to change the world for the better, but now they actually have the tools to change themselves. And I think that's going to make for a pretty powerful recipe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're using, I get pretty down on social media. I talk about it on this podcast, and I actually like that you're injecting a form of pause and sort of a balancing energy with your own work on that medium. So it's good. It's good for me to remember that. And there are a lot of tools out there. And there's a whole new stories being written by many different people. One thing you said there that's funny is there's some of these Buddhist teachers, these Western teachers are going over now to Japan and being asked to teach, or Christian Das is being asked to play in India. And it's Westerners are coming full circle and coming back to these places to teach the youth because that's what they relate with now. But it's their own tradition. Yeah. Well, just a couple more questions and we can wrap this up. I want to honor your time, but one thing I'm always interested in is how would you describe where your own edge or challenges are at? What's something sort of you're facing these days that is kind of a current space for you?
I think, let's see, a challenge today is honestly all the Yung Pueblo stuff has grown really quickly. And especially over the past 2 years. So balancing my ability to be really productive with all of that work, following up with messages, following up with emails, continuing to plan events, doing podcasts, doing all these things. When I initially started the Yung Pueblo work, I had nothing to do because I intentionally took a break from working because I knew that if I wanted to be a writer. So I was like, okay, let me set myself this time period of my life so I can actually cultivate this skill, so I can start doing this, see if this is even viable, if it actually helps people. And there was a time period where, I had very little to do during the day because I was really trying to figure all of this out. And now that it is working, my day feels very full and it feels very scheduled. And that's something that I'm definitely sort of shifting, which is really sort of highlighting my need for more patience and my need to meditate even more. Because I find that the more I meditate, the more effective I am in everyday life. So being able to see these different areas that I need to grow into has been actually really helpful and pretty inspiring, but also, of course, difficult because it's just wow, there are totally moments when I feel overwhelmed and I'm there's so much to do and not enough time. But then I also, fall back into the practice and I'm oh, right. But also I'm just like attaching myself to my ideas right now, and I'm attaching myself to like this idea of like being busy and all of that. And if I really look at it, there's no problem at all, and there's only just an abundance of good things.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate with the being very busy, and then being your work itself is sort of about the opposite, and it's really
No, it's so
it really is. It's really interesting. Yeah, and it being and it becoming a business and a career too is really fascinating. You know, doing that dance, it's something you have to check in with constantly and kind of keep the keel of your ship moving straight.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's so easy to fall into just becoming like another advertising channel.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah,
because like I get so many different offers to like advertise things, and I'm always saying no, because I want my place to be exact. I think that was one of the best descriptions I've ever heard when you said my work is like a place to pause. And that's what I'm really hoping for people when they're engaging with my writing. It's like a space to just like take a deep breath, pause, and a thought that can help you, that you can sort of carry with yourself throughout the rest of the day, for you to better like, connect different moments in your life, or hopefully get some value out of it.
yeah,
But people just like all they see are numbers, and especially different businesses, they just want to interact with numbers. And it's interesting trying to keep all of that at bay and just like maintain what I personally see as useful, and also like keeping, like one thing I like to do is just keep my page as a safe space from ads, because like people are so inundated with ads. Like the only thing that I will tell you about is that I have a book and that you can go buy it if you want to. But other than that, I'm not trying to sell you anything, which
yeah,
is like one of my personal values.
yeah.
Not
Well,
that if other people doing that, I don't think that's wrong, but that's just for me.
yeah, no, and it's admirable and it's very clean, and I know how it goes. Like you need to make a living, and so there's a balance there of making those decisions about how to bring in income and how to do what you do. So, well, I just wanted to ask you one last question before, and after that, I'd love to have you either read something else to close, or maybe even guide us in a guided meditation. Your choice, dealer's choice. But what advice would you give to the average person out there who started to sort of wake up on their own path, and maybe they're creative, maybe they feel they're not, but either way they want to start putting themselves out into the world, and they want to do it in a way that feels in alignment with these discoveries they've now felt about the energy they want to be bringing into the world and not adding to the problem.
So do you mean in terms of sharing, or do you mean in terms of like starting on their own path?
Could be either. It's kind of an open question. You can respond however, whatever brings up for you. It could be like how to go about it, but it could also be like, watch out for this pitfall. Or it's like, just try to remember this one thing.
Oh, I love that. I think, the first thing I want to say is definitely reiterate what I mentioned before, is that if you're really, really just starting off, you want to find something that's challenging and not overwhelming. So finding that sweet spot, something that not only is that, but you feel as a practice, but you also feel that you have a particular connection to it. Like it resonates with you. It feels right. It feels like you should be giving it your time. I think that's really important. I think the other side of it is that my advice is like, you really got to be able to let go of all your ideas if you really want to grow. I don't think we quite see how attached we are to some ideas, and a bit of really delving into the introspective world is relinquishing our tight hold on ideas that are like fundamental aspects of the reality or the story that we've created for ourselves. And being able to let those go helps new discoveries happen, and helps like real freedom push forward. Or it helps you even see that the idea that you did have, there is some validity to it, but now you have that validity through experience as opposed to just blind belief, right? So I think being really flexible with our ideas. I remember this, I think it's a poem by Hafiz, or I forget which mystic poet it was, but I remember this poem going something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was saying, love has taught me so much that I no longer believe in the soul. I no longer believe in in like angels. And he just went on this long list of all these different ideas because, and basically ended with, because none of these words actually capture the magnitude of what it really is. So just going through this long line of lists, and it's just like, I believe in this, that, and that, but I can't anymore because the more that I'm learning, these words seem too small. And I think that was pretty hard for me when I started on my path. And now I'm seeing that, it's really useful to let go.
I love it. I love it, man. Was there anything like that you're like, man, why doesn't he ask me about this? Or nobody ever asked me the such and such question?
Oh no, man. This has been great. This has been really out of the podcast norm. I appreciate that.
I didn't ask you where you're from. I didn't ask you how you got your name.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Those are like on interviews and stuff.
What's your inspiration? Yeah. I get asked all those things too, so I get bored of it. Well, before we close this out, because I kind of want to end with just the sweetness of what we end with, how do people find you? Where would you like to point them to?
Well, you can find me on Instagram. That's one of the best places. It's so the name that I write under is YUNG_PUEBLO, pronounced Yung Pueblo. And I'm on Instagram. You can also find my book, Inward, INWARD. You can find it in Barnes and Nobles and your local bookstores. You can find it online on Amazon or Book Depository. And it's also available. It was originally written in English, and recently the Spanish translation has come out. And yeah, I'm out there.
I was going to ask you actually if, like, because I'm assuming you speak Spanish, if you wrote it yourself, did you quote unquote translate it yourself?
No, I let the professionals do it because there's actually so many different variations of Spanish, though they're all very similar. There's so much slang and so much, varieties of Spanish because it's really spoken in like such a multitude of countries that there's actually, when you're working in the publishing world, there's this type of Spanish called general Spanish, where they write books in a very particular way so that anyone from the Spanish-speaking world will be able to understand the book.
How does it read for you when you read it in Spanish?
Oh, I think it's incredible. So what I did do was that when they finished the translation, I got to approve all of it. So I got to read it. My mom got to read it. And, we changed a few things that didn't seem too common. We wanted to make sure that it was really appealing to a South American audience. But it was just wonderful to hear it in the language, to read it in the language I was first speaking in. Yeah. It was a really kind of bewildering moment to be able to hold one book in English in my hands that I personally wrote, and then another one translated in my mother tongue.
Well, it's kind of coming full circle from your own life in a way, which is, it's got this sort of meta aspect of you were born there. You came to the States, you make your name in English, and then it goes back to Spanish.
I know it's really it's awesome to be able to witness that, and it's exciting to see, how that sort of plays out in the future as well. Yeah,
I'd love to encourage you to do some writing in Spanish too, just to have that other aspect of your work out there directly from your own voice.
Yeah. Would you still be open to me reading a little piece? I'm looking through.
Yes, I'd love to. I was going to have you read something else, or a lot of I talk to meditators too and stuff, and they guide us through a meditation, but it's sort of a similar thing. So whichever you want.
Yeah. No, I actually don't teach meditation. I'm a pretty serious meditation student, but I've been pretty seriously.
How much are you meditating a day?
I meditate 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening.
That's like the Vipassana path. You're sticking to it.
Oh yeah, totally. It's really working for me. So I stick to it because it's giving me the results that I'm looking for. This one's a good one.
Is this from the book or is this something else?
No, this one's new too. This one might make the next book.
Awesome.
Yeah. This one goes, letting go does not mean you have given up, and it does not mean you no longer care. It just means that you are releasing the attachments of the past that keep getting in the way of your happiness and mental clarity. Letting go is the unbinding and disentangling of old behavior patterns that keep pulling you into unnecessary mental tension and worry. When you can be okay with things not having gone a certain way, life begins again. Making peace with the past opens you up to love, adventures, and allows you to apply the lessons you have learned with a new calmness. The end.
Mm. Thank you so much, man. Yung Pueblo,
Yeah.
put your stuff in the show notes here, and it's been real fun talking to you, and hope to cross paths face to face someday.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Thank you so much for setting all this up. This has been a really, really fruitful conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there it is. That's my conversation with Yung Pueblo. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Yung, Mr. Pueblo. I really enjoyed it. It really got me thinking about my own meditation, and I like that there's many roads that lead to Rome, but it's always wonderful to get to talk to people who are very much on their path and committed to it. This song that you're hearing in the background is called Come Back, and it is the last and 13th track on Music for Mushrooms. If you want to hear it in its full glory, go over to eastforest.org and hit the music tab, and you can download the Music for Mushrooms, a soundtrack for the psychedelic practitioner, in high-res format, the highest 24-bit format if you like. But of course, you can now stream the album on iTunes, Spotify, and pretty much wherever you listen to music. It's not yet on SoundCloud, but I probably get it up there soon. Other than that, please give this podcast a review. It only takes a few seconds. You can tap the little 5 stars there. You can also give it a written review, and you can say hello and ask questions or give comments at info@eastforest.org. Looking forward to seeing you on the West Coast. More conversations to come. You guys just keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, please do it with grace.
Ooh.